Hello and welcome to Cash 22. I'm your host, Mark Allen. Every year, over 1 million people in this country graduate from college. And what's the #1 reason they go to college? To get a better job. Each of us has a dream of becoming something great. Some of us want to be athletes. Some want to fight crime on the police force. And some ambitious souls even want to fly to space. When it comes down to it, most of us end up doing something that we wouldn't have predicted as a child. Personally, I've spent time in sales, driving a forklift in a warehouse, teaching swimming lessons, being a tour guide, and even spent a weekend working as a clown making balloon animals. After all, we can't all be firefighters, doctors, and airline pilots, right? Cash 22 is a program about the careers that lie in front of us and what it takes to succeed and make a living. Most college graduates are around the age of 22, and the one thing that's on all of their minds? Cash. How will they make their living? Will they enjoy it at the same time? Will they excel in their chosen field? And what does it take to get there? One thing I think every young professional could use to succeed in the world is a guide or mentor. Somebody that's been there and done that. Somebody that's had to change jobs, work for a demanding boss, and deliver results to stay ahead. To make things fun, what we're going to do on this show is meet up-and-coming young professionals, learn about their hopes and dreams, and bring in seasoned professionals and experts in the field to mentor them live, right here on the show. Welcome back to Cash 22. I'm here today with Lauren Olson, who's the owner of Remark Clothing. Lauren has a very unique business that she started after college, which takes recycled old clothes, t-shirts, pants, you name it. We'll get to learn a little bit more about that, and turns them into works of art and clothing that are sold at art fairs and other venues. So we have the opportunity today to get to know Lauren and learn about why she went into this profession, how she markets herself and sells the clothes. So Lauren, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great. So tell us a little bit about your business. It's called Remark Clothing, is that right?
That's right. And so what I do is I take old textiles. I'm focusing right now on t-shirts and moving into sweatshirts and make them into new garments.
Okay, so why did you decide to take old clothing and make them into new ones?
Well, the big thing is I come from a recycling background, and there isn't really a good end market for old textiles. And as you can probably imagine, we have a plethora of old clothing around. So looking at ways to utilize them that were not maybe the usual paths that they might follow.
Okay, so was your business born out of a passion for the environment and sustainability, or more out of clothing, perhaps both?
Perhaps both, but I would say a lot in the sustainability sort of aspect. And without that, I don't think I'd be making clothing.
Okay, so now you can make a product that's fashionable and you feel good because you're helping the environment?
Right.
Is that right? Okay. And you have a degree in this area? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So yeah, I went to school at Michigan State University, and I got an undergraduate degree in environmental economics. So I'm using a lot of that in terms of looking at the economy of clothing, how it's created, marketed, and sold. And as you can imagine, a lot of people are losing in different parts of that supply chain. And then also, I got a master's degree focusing on recycling, in particular, how to communicate about recycling and how to facilitate that pro-environmental behavior.
Okay, so let's go back a few years in your life. When you were a child, say middle school, maybe even into high school, were you passionate about this area? Recycling was always important to you?
Yeah, definitely. The environment, I was very concerned about climate change, the greenhouse effect, I think they more or less called it when I was in late, elementary school, middle school. So I always wanted to go into something involving the environment. When I finally got to the point where I was trying to like pick schools and really try to figure out what I wanted to do as a degree, I was actually looking at doing industrial design, but with a focus on environmental industrial design. And I couldn't find like a program for it. Now those programs exist, of course, you know, but they didn't then, because I was very interested in, I have an artist mom, so, you know, I have that background. My brother is a graphic artist, and then my dad is a tool and die maker, so he's very like engineering, you know, but also very artistic in a lot of ways and creative. So utilizing all that, I, you know, wanted to do something involving the environment, but I couldn't really figure out how to put it together. So I ended up going into economics because I'm really good at math. And
Okay, so you have the family that's artistic and
Yeah.
good with building things, tooling, and wow, that seemed like a really good fit. So what were some of the other things you considered before you became a clothing designer?
Well, yeah, I consider all sorts of things. I really do like teaching too. So, and I did that for a while when I worked at Michigan State University. I taught professional development type classes for staff about how they can bring environmental principles into their workplace. So using less paper, turning off the lights, things like that.
Okay.
So I enjoyed that as well. So I always considered teaching too, but my mom ended up going into teaching art, and she always told me every day after school, don't go into teaching. So.
Oh, really? Okay. My
Yeah.
mom was actually a teacher as well. I'd see her after school with a stack of papers
Right.
she's grading. And
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
worn out.
Oh,
definitely.
yeah,
So-
yeah. A lot of work into
yeah,
that.
it is. Okay, so what type of art does your mother do? You said she's also an artist?
Yeah, so she did a lot of fiber work, and so her big thing was batik and dyeing. So we did that a lot in the summers growing up, and I still really enjoy dyeing and that sort of thing. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't
Okay.
tried it before, you should
I haven't. I've
Yeah.
tried sewing. I actually tried making a shirt once. It didn't turn out very well. It was the first time. But did you have a sewing machine in your house growing
Yeah,
up? And
yeah.
was that something used often?
I use it sometimes, but I would get yelled at too because I don't always like change the tension and then, you know, mess it up. So it wasn't until my grandmother ended up going into an assisted living home and she gave me her old sewing machine that I was able to really mess around with the sewing
okay.
machine, because before then, you know, I was just messing up my mom's sewing machine,
Oh, okay.
which was not cool.
Is the type of sewing machine you use, the brand, is that all very important? Are there certain ones that you need to have?
Oh yeah, definitely. So I went from the typical like single needle type sewing machine is not, that's used on like woven type fabrics, so like your shirt.
The
so
single this is much older version.
Oh
I
yes,
assume.
yes.
An antique, but-
And then I use a serger type machine for
Okay.
my purposes with the knit fabrics. And so the serger was actually created by someone trying to create a crochet machine.
Okay.
And then they ended up creating this like multi-thread stitch, which can sew fabrics which have a lot of stretch to them.
Right. Okay. Was that something you had formal education on, or just picked it up at home?
Yeah, so yeah, I didn't have any education in sewing or anything like that. So I was just doing it, you know, in my spare time. And, you know, like you, I sewed that first shirt and was like, wow, this shirt sucks. And I think everyone goes through that.
Yours was probably better than mine.
Oh, we'll see. I don't know. So, you know, there is quite a bit of learning curve in that. And so for a while I was just dabbling. I went to some classes here or there at like, you know, at local quilting store.
Okay.
But, you know, there's not too much available these days in terms of, you know, adults learning how to sew type classes, which is kind of a shame. I do
Right.
feel like.
Well, since you like teaching, maybe you can teach a class here. and
Yeah,
there, so-
yeah. So that's something I would like to have in the future is as part of maybe like my sort of like storefront studio is also to have classes, because I think it's important that people realize too how much work it takes to make a garment, and because nowadays people don't sew, I think we really just do think that these clothes just sort of like appear.
You take it for granted.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And with fast fashion making everything so cheap, you're like, wow, this must be really easy to make, when in fact it's very difficult to make, but just someone's not really paid to do it.
Right. So many of the garments come from overseas. How do you feel about the manufacturing in different countries of clothing like that?
Yeah, I mean, you just hear these horror stories that are awful. But yeah, I've read a lot of books about it. There's a couple books out there about like the economics of a T-shirt, and then there's stuff about the high price of fast fashion. Pretty common themes out there.
Right. So you feel that Remark Clothing is a sustainable business, not only by the garments you produce were formerly other T-shirts or clothes, but also you have ethical business practices, and there's no slave labor, obviously, anything like that. So.
Yeah, although, you know, sometimes I wonder about myself, but yeah, there's, you know, it's very, yeah, looking at the tiers of sustainability in terms of social equity and environmental equity, I think it's very sustainable in terms of using end-use products. But it would be nice to see a future in which we didn't have so many T-shirts. So that would be saying that then my business would kind of teeter out, but
I'm sure you could find
I would
something
be happy
else
to see
use,
that
so.
world, you know, where we had just had less discarded clothing because people valued their clothing more.
Oh, definitely. Are there other businesses that you try to emulate that you admire that are sustainable? I think of Tom's Shoes, where they give 1 for 1, or you know, other businesses like that. Have you tried to model yours after others, or do you admire other businesses?
Yeah, I think Tom's is like a good model of, you know, social equity in terms of their model. I think Patagonia is doing a lot of very innovative things in terms of looking at taking back their clothing and also emphasizing less consumption, things that are meant to be around for the long haul rather than this planned obsolescence of, you know, you buy something, it wears out, you have to buy another, and you continue on that cycle.
So being responsible consumer is not to buy clothes for this season, throw them out, and then next season buy the next fashion. That's definitely a bad practice.
Yeah, that's pretty much the practice that we're all stuck in right now.
Right.
So it works for me because I'll be using the discards, but at the same time, I do hope that we figure out a different model of consumption.
Right, I agree. That's important. So at what point when you were sewing clothes or in school did you decide to make a career out of making recycled clothing? When was it that you said, oh, I could actually do this for a living?
I guess it would be maybe now, like maybe 2.5 years ago, and I was just practicing, trying to really get down how to sew knits, because, you know, I've sewn wovens, but I don't really wear like woven clothing. Like I don't wear shirts like you're wearing. It's not really type of my wardrobe. I really like things that are, you know, more out of the T-shirt fabric.
Okay.
So learning how to sew knits better, different interlock knits, and getting that down. And then I was like, well, how could I make, you know, this into something sustainable? Because I was doing some craft shows at the time, just kind of like very lowbrow stuff, trying to figure out, you know, if I could have some sort of creative, artistic business on the side. So for a while I was doing terrariums.
Terrarium?
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
So I found all this lab glassware at the Michigan State University surplus store.
Okay.
And so I was turning those
Like
into
chemistry lab?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was turning those into like different little plant biome type things, you know, because it was reusing of an old thing, and it was cool because they had plants in them. So I was learning a lot about different plant propagation and going along that path.
So you would sell those at an art fair. Did they have plants growing out of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
But then, you know, it was fun, but there was also a lot of issues in terms of terrariums, such as if I was at a hot art fair, the plants might die in them because it was really hot. You can't really ship them. So I was like, this is really not the business for me.
Right.
You know, they're fun to make, and maybe I'll just, you know, give them to people as presents, but I don't think I need to like make them. So I was going back into my sewing more, you know, continuing on that path, and just like sewing stuff on the side for myself. And I was trying to fit together some old T-shirts. And so I made some stuff from old T-shirts, but I found they just like weren't working, and they look frumpy. And when you go on Etsy and stuff, you see a lot of stuff made from old T-shirts, and it kind of has that sort of like frumpy look.
So how do you address that? How did you fix it?
So yeah, after just really putting my mind to it and trying to figure out like what is up with these textiles and why do they not fit together, I had to like now develop what I call to other people a proprietary method.
Okay.
Sort of a trade secret to
Okay.
like figure out the stretch and the weight of the different t-shirts relatively quickly in terms of time, because I can't spend a whole bunch of time, for every shirt.
Okay. Right.
Seeing as though there's like sometimes 4 to 5 different t-shirts that might go into a single garment. So I developed this method to make sure that the shirts were of similar weight and stretch. That way they looked cohesive.
Okay.
Rather than frumpy, I guess would be the only word I have for it, or homey. And
okay. So tell us about, you're wearing a dress that you made right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us what went into this in terms of the materials, where you sourced them, and how much work this took to make a dress like this.
Yeah, what's funny is everyone wants to know like time. They're always like, how much time does it take? But I found that that's pretty common like along all artistic endeavors. Everyone's always like, how much time did it take? And
well, probably the learning process was a big amount of time, and then each unit is probably not a lot.
Yeah, each unit's not anything compared to how much time it took to actually be like, oh my God,
know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, this dress, it looks like it has at least 4 different types of shirts from it. And I get all of my different shirts from thrift stores.
Okay.
Volunteers of America, Mid-Michigan in particular, has been very helpful in helping me along this process. They also allow me to go to their warehouse in Mason and buy clothing by the pound.
Okay.
So that's been
great.
very nice of them. And then also I get a lot of donations just from people who are like, they have a collection, but they don't really want to call it a collection, more like a heap
Okay.
that they're willing to like part with and give away. And then the other thing too, part of my business is custom garments. So I have a lot of people who have, that very dear t-shirt from a vacation or from a concert, and they want it utilized in some way that's not just wearing that t-shirt.
Okay. Or maybe their significant other wants it utilized instead of wear their Metallica t-shirt around the house for 20 years.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you design the pattern first and with the colors in mind and then choose the garment, or do you actually go to the store or the thrift store, see what they have, and come up with the design based on that?
So yeah, I just actually, when I go to the thrift store, I just buy like anything that I see that I like.
Oh, okay.
So I'll come home with like, hundreds of t-shirts.
Wow.
So usually if things are going right, I'll go right to the laundromat and just go to those. They have like 50-pound washing machines and just like shove those full.
Just wash all of the shirts.
Wash them all, because they all have that Goodwill smell.
Oh, yeah, I'm familiar with that smell.
Yeah. So you got to get that out of there right away. And also I wash them in hot just because I want to be sure that they're all shrunk as much as they're going to shrink.
Okay.
And so that they're all in the
that
same level.
That would have to do with the frumpiness and the
just making it look
so.
Cohesive and well put together.
Okay. So this dress, back to this one, you made this in a couple of hours, and
I mean,
not that the time is the primary thing,
right?
But just to understand the process.
Yeah, I mean, it probably would take like under an hour, but I try to do things in batches. So I'll like serge everything together, which is the inside seam, and then I'll take a bunch of serge garments, maybe, hopefully 15 or 20, and then I'll cover stitch, which is the bottom hem or the sleeve hem stitching, and then I will do the neckband. Or it might be in, a different sort of order, but.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you decide which sizes to make? Do you make a variety and then sell them at the art fair, or do you take the order first and then custom make the clothing?
Yeah, so I have both sides of the coin. So I do the custom business, which is based on whatever they size that they want it. And then also I make ready-made garments to sell at the art fairs.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about that process. Now that you have your garment that you've made, how do you make money and go about selling these products?
Well, something I didn't realize as much that would be a part of my business in the clothing business is steaming or ironing and, making sure there's no loose threads or no dog hairs or anything like that. So that's a big part of prepping the garments to go out to an art fair.
Okay.
and then, tagging them. So I use old box board, like cereal boxes, cracker boxes, stuff like that as my hang tags. And I just have a stamp. And so then I have to like size and put hang tags in all the garments and then get them all prepped and ready.
And you display them like we have here on a homemade dress form, paper mache.
Yeah. And then I have a whole grid wall art fair sort of thing put together. And a big part of it that I didn't realize was trying to figure out like what size people would come and buy garments. So that was a learning
What's
curve.
the most popular size?
Most popular size for the princess dress is a small.
Okay.
So I always have to have a lot of smalls on hand. And then for the one I'm wearing, the most popular size is small, and then also like large and extra large.
Okay. So less in between then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was, something like
Something
I don't
you
know.
learned doing the job. So tell me about one of these art fairs you've been to recently. What was that like?
Well, just this past weekend, I did Scrap Fest in Old Town Lansing.
Okay.
And that was interesting because I got to also be able to coordinate the craft fair. So we're looking at adding a craft component to this festival that had all eco and recycled crafters.
Okay.
So that
Were
was fun to
you
put together.
the only person there that had recycled clothing made
I
into
was.
dresses?
Yeah.
Okay.
It just so happened to be that way. I would have happily had anyone else, but that was what it ended up.
So how much of your time do you spend speaking with customers coming by and looking, and how much is sitting there and waiting for somebody?
It's a lot of time speaking with people,
Okay.
and yeah, people are very interested in it.
It's probably unique. I hadn't seen something like this before.
Yeah.
I met you.
So yeah, it's a lot of time talking with people, which is always interesting. And another thing I didn't realize when I was starting to do this was like how much time I'd also spend talking with people about like their bodies, because everyone comes in, they're like, oh, I wish I could wear this, but I'm too fat, or I'm too old, and
So you find
end
yourself
up being
as
like
a motivator or counselor
yeah.
in some sense. And
About many things.
You're beautiful, this works for you.
Yes, like you're not too old, you look great, and
Right.
and then also talking with them about they might have issues that they're talking about with how much stuff they have, and then they might talk to me about, oh, I have so many clothes, I don't really need another thing, and so it's really interesting the amount of issues that people have sort of bound up into the consumption of clothing.
Okay. So can you make an actual living doing what you're doing, or how do you feel about that? Is this sustainable from an economic standpoint?
Yeah, I guess I'll see. Right now, I would say I'm not making too much of a living, but I am making enough to get by.
Okay,
So,
enough to pay rent and feed yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
So I would like to get to the point, though, where I'm making obviously more. But that would require some different, I'd have to get out of my house, get a studio, make sure that I have money to support that studio, and
Right. So
all of those sort of things.
what does that path look like for a designer that becomes successful and wealthy? Is that you move to New York and you get your name, celebrities wearing your clothes, or?
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, it's hard because so I'm doing more of this like art sort of clothing because each piece is unique, whereas like other people, I guess I would say, are doing different types of clothing business where they just, they're buying maybe 200 yards of a fabric and then making, 500 pieces out of that, and
Okay.
so it's a different sort of business where they're looking at maybe getting into, some sort of store chain, whereas like I
Right.
would never
Yours a
be able to,
boutique.
yeah.
Right.
So I would be more, boutique or some sort of smaller, because I just don't really see it having that capacity, and each one is also one of a kind, so it doesn't really fit the normal
Right.
sort of corporate
There's
model.
definitely a demand for that, I would think. Artistic community and people that are wealthier often seek custom clothing like that. Tell us a little bit about marketing your business. You have a website, and do you do that yourself?
Yep. So I use Squarespace, so just like a nice little plug-in sort of thing.
Okay. And what else do you do to market yourself? Is it primarily these shows, or do you send out emails to your customers with clothing?
I have a
photos
newsletter,
Okay.
which I could probably do more with, but I send that out every once in a while. And then, the Instagram, I have that, and Facebook. But I will say that as a small business owner, it's very difficult to remember to actually talk about what you're doing, or to figure out a way to talk about it that's not like, today I spent all day trying to figure out how to get this skirt to work and it didn't really work out,
So you can use your writing skills and get creative there.
Yeah, or sometimes I'm just like, I don't think anyone really wants to hear about that.
Right. I've seen businesses on YouTube filming how they're making things and working with customers on video. Have you thought about maybe doing video with your customers or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's one of those things too. I just really need to make enough money to make that leap to get out of the house too.
Right.
Because no one wants to see, my dirty kitchen too.
Right. You have to have a nice backdrop.
Right. Have it
Yeah.
look pretty.
Yeah. Okay. So of all the aspects of your business, which part do you enjoy the most? Is it speaking with the customers at the shows, making the clothing, marketing yourself? Which part do you enjoy?
I think I really enjoy the most the pattern making part
Okay.
and designing the clothing and looking at when people try it on, what they tug on, what they like, what they don't like, and then doing tweaks on the pattern. I think sometimes
Okay.
I get a little bit too much into that, the whole engineering sort of aspect of figuring out how to fit the garment to the human.
That's your mathematical mind at work?
I guess so.
Okay. There's a lot of math that actually goes into making clothes, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was really surprised, but it's quite a bit.
Good. So which part of your business do you not enjoy? Would you farm out if you had another person?
Oh, definitely that finishing portion I was telling you about, like the
Steaming and tagging.
yeah. So
Okay.
I have hired friends and traded clothing or services in that way for them to help me before shows. I don't have enough time to to steam
Prep
all these
everything,
things. Yeah.
Make it look nice. Okay. If you were to meet a mentor, which we're going to do, what sort of things would you like to learn from somebody that's been in the fashion design or clothing business for a while? What would be helpful for you?
I guess anything that they think I don't know.
It's hard to know what you don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to know what you don't know. So any aspects that they think in terms of, working with clients, making that sort of business work, particularly as I start to do more custom clothing.
Okay. And if you weren't doing this, what other sort of business have you considered? What would you be doing?
Probably more in the consulting, which I am doing right now with businesses about how to make their business more sustainable.
Okay.
So looking at maybe reducing waste, becoming zero waste, doing workplace greening activities, but looking at long-term how they can rethink their business in such a way that they could make it more sustainable.
And you do that also right now, the clothing and the consulting? Yeah. What's an example of a type of business that would approach you for your consulting services?
Well, right now I'm working with a recycling plant in the Grand Rapids area, and they're looking at becoming zero waste.
Oh, okay. Well, that would be a satisfying thing to bring a business to zero waste, right?
Yeah, and since I've always been concerned about waste, I have a background in dumpster diving, and so I actually do get paid to sort through trash, which is a lot of my dumpstering sort of background.
That sounds like a fun thing to do, right?
Yeah, and I know
Look
a lot
for
about the
treasure
different, plastics and different papers. I can readily identify them, so it's really easy for me to sort through it.
Okay, great. Well, Lauren, we're going to wrap up the show, and I've gotten to know you fairly well, I think, through this conversation, and I'm impressed with what you do. If you ever make men's clothing, let me know, and I'll take a look at that.
Sounds good.
Thanks again for being on the show. On our next episode, we're going to actually introduce you to Michelle Munson, and she owns a fashion design studio and tailoring business in downtown Ann Arbor called the Nonpareil Studio. She's been in the business for 20 plus years or so, so we'll get to know her a little bit. A couple of things she's done is actually make costumes for the opera, that sort of thing. Yeah. Have you ever worked with a mentor before?
No, I have not.
No? Okay. Who do you usually go to for advice?
I guess depending on what I need, my various friends and contacts.
Okay.
Something tell me I'm in need of a woman like you. Yes, something tell me I'm in need of a woman like you. Don't deny my